Good morning.
Good morning, Do.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Doing fine. It's a pleasure to be here.
Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
We're going to get into this conversation. We're going to have a real one about, some of the things that we see and some of the things that ought to be done. We'll talk. But in the meantime, Dennis is going to give you today's proverb. He'll tell you where it's from, and we'd like to get your interpretation of the same.
You see, the proverb today comes from a country where if you want to be 8 years younger, you just make sure you get citizenship of that country. We're talking about Ethiopia, which, according to them, they are in 2017. So if you want to be Chomoa 8 years, just go to Ethiopia. But then again, there's a lot about Ethiopia. They consider themselves to be home of coffee. Some of the best coffees in the world, Ethiopia. Kenyans used to say ours is better. But then again, there is also the matters to do with the athlete, who is better, nani anakimbia mbali sana and faster. We also have that. But also it is home of Blue Nile. Home of Blue Nile. They're constructing one of the biggest dams that will help the country with matters to do with power and energy. Sure. And our proverb today, no one washes their hands with only one finger. No one washes their hands with only one finger. I'll start with you, Patrick.
Well, I think that the way I interpret it is that you'll need all your fingers for you to effectively wash your hands. So basically it's telling us that we need each other. If we need to see change, we need to work together. So basically for me, that's how I interpret it. Okay. So it's more like kidole kimoja hakivunji chao. Exactly.
Ouko.
Yeah, I think it's more of a similar interpretation that if you want to do something more effectively, you need like a collective contribution towards it, and none of us can singularly achieve, without the help or resourcing it from other sources in terms of getting just the help to do something. Yes. Yeah.
Everybody plays a role here.
Yes, everybody plays a role.
Coming together.
Yes.
Okay, so great. Because we have conversations around the youth perspective and saying that, should it just be young people on their own? These folks who have the majority in terms of population, who then say, well, since we are the biggest in numbers, then should we not just be then charting the course and looking for our own leader? But should we actually then say, because we are the largest in number, can we make sure that we are involved in the conversation towards better governance and things like that? I'd like to get an overall perspective of where you're coming from that. Let's start with Ouko. When we talk about, saying participation in governance, and we tend to think that governance can only then be practiced if you have a position, president, governor, senator, member of parliament, MCA, and we think, okay, well, when you have that title behind your name, that's when you are in governance. But let's take an overview first of all. When we're talking about inviting everybody in to have this conversation, where do we stand?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. I think it depends with what actually needs to be achieved, right? So, for example, if what we are seeing today is that most young people like existing in terms of decentralized structures, right? We are partyless, we are tribeless, we are leaderless, we are ungoverned. We like operating under decentralized structures. But you ask yourself, to what end, right? So if it is in the form of activism, there are things which we would wish to achieve via activism, right? Going to the street, etc., then decentralized structures would most likely work. But if you reach to the point where you'll need some of the things that you are advocating for, say it's good governance, etc., what I've often learned that in politics you can never go against the tide. What will need work will need to persuade our young people is that they will need to then form themselves under centralized structures, right? So even if you want to take up these seats that they are advocating for, say in 2027, of course they must come under some party. They must roll themselves under some leaders. They cannot be say that they're tribeless, etc. So I think, to the end into which they will expect some of these things to be implemented, they would then need to come under centralized structures.
Then again, there is the entire conversation on, as much as there is the talk of partyless, leaderless, tribeless, there is the fact that whatever is being pushed right now is we want justice, we want end to corruption, we want addressing unemployment in the country, we want fidelity to the rule of law and constitutionalism. And if you just listen to some of the listeners who are listening this morning, they're saying, just deal with all these issues that you are raising, and Kenya will be a better place to go. So where do you stand, Wakili, in terms of fidelity to the rule of law, the issues being raised, and the need to address those, and perhaps Kenya will be on a good highway?
Yeah, I actually agree with you 100%. Because if you listen to what the young people are agitating for, they're actually telling the government to actually just adhere to the rule of law, follow the constitution, and we'll be okay. Now, you haven't seen the Gen Z saying that Ruto must go, and we have this person that we want to make president. That is not the argument that the young people are having. They are actually telling the government needs to follow the law. The government needs to adhere to the dictates of the constitution. And as much as structures and centralized structures are important, the way I see this whole movement, I think the way the Gen Zs are approaching it is actually working. Because if you see how the government is trying to counter the same, we saw, I think it was yesterday in Parliament, when they were discussing the aftermath of 25th. You could see the discussion that was there. They were trying to trivialize the whole issue and try to blame other political leaders for what happened. So from where I sit, I see it as these people trying to bring this whole conversation to somewhere where they can be able to manage it, and that is through politics. But what the young people are actually fighting for is economic liberation. So you cannot bring a political solution to an economic problem. So that is where the government, I think, is getting it wrong. And I think if they would have the will to listen to what the people are actually saying, we won't need to have demonstration in the streets and people fighting every day. They just have to listen, and after listening, actually have that will to do what they have been told, not just some PR activities here and there, and then getting back to the default settings.
So they're hearing, they're discussing it in Parliament. That clearly shows that finally there are inroads being made. But when it comes to implementation and addressing really to the T, what is being raised is where we have challenges. Ouko, why do you think that's the case? That we are hearing, we are listening, but when it comes to implementation, where rubber meets the road, nothing really seems to be working.
Yeah, perhaps before I answer that question, I would need to maybe retaliate whatever my brother said. I think there is a political fix to this thing, and I've often been asking myself, is this movement really tribeless? Is it like the more things change, the more they still remain the same? Because if you look at the way these protests were happening the other day, why is it that in dominated places where it's, how do we perceive it, the broad-based dominated places, we are not able to see the Gen Zs from these places on the streets? If you look at Nyanza, entire Nyanza, it was entirely peaceful. There were no protests. If you go to Western, if you go to Coast, if you go to a majority, if you go to Northeastern, is there a connotation to this that perhaps it's not that entirely tribeless, and the areas that are being socially perceived to be out of government are the ones that are leading in this demonstration? So is it a connotation? Because the people who are saying is that how can the Nyanza of the Gen Zs from Nyanza decide to go to the streets when they are already now being socially perceived that they are currently in government? In answering your question as to why now when it comes to the implementation it becomes a challenge, now Patrick, there's something called structural dependency, and this is something that exists all over in the world, that for a government, for politicians to be effective, they create this thing called structural dependency, that we do not want to give you too much that you'll start that will leverage your thinking in another way, but we just want to give you that little just for your basic needs. That's why I think many a times governments and politicians are very reluctant in giving an overhaul help or implementation of some of these things. They want you to be dependent. They do not want to give these young people jobs so that they are politically...
It's not their job.
Yeah,
let's start there. It is not the job of government to give jobs.
Yes,
it's the job of government to create an environment
environment
where these jobs will then happen. that if they don't do the things that they're supposed to do, then perhaps one could see that, okay, there's the reluctance to do that. But I have to ask, what do you think they would gain if they don't create an environment that is conducive? Because what are we talking about if we get down to the brick and mortar? What are we talking about when we say creating a conducive environment? That means if somebody wants to start business, that maybe you make it a little bit easier, that they don't need 330,000 shillings to get a license in one, sector, or that they don't need 15 different licenses if they wanted to open a restaurant, kind of thing that we're talking about. Or if you wanted a small shop where you were selling goods, that you didn't need so many things. Those are the barriers that we're talking about breaking. What would be the gain for somebody to not create that environment? What would they gain?
Yes, I think there might be the distincts about creating jobs and creating an enabling environment. As I've said, it's structural dependency, okay? What do I mean by structural dependency? If today I'm an unemployed young man, okay, and government creates... remember, the people who run governments are politicians, okay? Generally, they're the ones where the buck stops with. So if Mark Ouko, somebody who is a young person who is unemployed today, and you give him a job where today he's, from Monday to Friday, he needs to report. Say, even if I'm working here at Standard Media every day, I don't even have the time to, I won't have the time to go to the streets. If somebody will need me to use me for political purposes, that's what I mean by structural dependency. Because for my basic needs are already covered. The person who is employed, the way they think about politics, they think around it, policy, direction, etc., etc. But people who are unemployed, they think about handouts. They think about how... So it's called structural dependency.
So are you saying that people are in the street because they lack, anything else to do?
No, not like they lack anything else to do. But a majority of those people in the streets, one is that majority of them are unemployed. A person who is employed, first of all, many of them do not have the latitude to even go to the street.
But you see, even those who are going to the streets today, some of them are going there to push for the idea that the government creates a better working environment for these jobs to be able to come up, so they can be entrepreneurs with their own SMEs and that they're working. So that the government needs to address the debt issue in the country, so that when an entrepreneur goes to the bank to ask for loan, it is easily received because the government has created that environment. And failure for the government to do that, therefore, this young person you say that is idle, finds himself out there. If you look at it from the other side, then it is the government that is shooting itself on the foot, because it is the one that is encouraging these young people to go out there and even fight them in regard to demanding for the very best. So then the question, Wakili, here comes where, fine, young people are out there, we are demanding for A, B, C, D to be done, but is not being done. With regard to fidelity of the law and the promises that were given, all the charters that were signed with the young people, do they feature anywhere in law? Or are those just promises and manifestos?
Well, first of all, when this government was campaigning, it made a lot of promises, very colorful and beautiful promises to the people, and especially to the young people. And I think that is one of the things that actually fueled this whole Gen Z revolution. Because the moment you promise heaven and people actually believe in you, and then they look at you as this person who's going to take them from the situation that they are in and take them to the next level, then you take government and then you forget everything that you had talked about. I think that that is one of the things that actually instigated this whole Gen Z movement, because they had a lot of hope. Once the government came into place, they started doing totally different things than what they had promised the young people. So, and the way I look at it, as we have a lot of economical issues that the young people are pushing for, but also it has reached a point where they are now pushing for human rights, right? Now, as much as they want to have an environment where they can do business, an environment where they can thrive, we've seen the government, we've seen them, young people dying in the hands of police. Now, that also brings in another aspect of us fighting for our human rights. I might have a job. I might go and represent a client. and that client pays me well. But when I get home, I see on the news that there's a person who has been arrested and that person has died in a police cell. Now that instills fear in me, because tomorrow it might be me, it might be my brother, it might be my sister who has been arrested, and then he or she loses his or her life in a police cell. So this thing is not only about the people, the young people who don't have jobs. Even the people who have jobs right now are fearing for their human rights because they are not safe. You get? So as much as there's some people who are fighting so that they can have a space where they can earn a living, there's another group that is fighting to make sure that, yes, myself at this particular moment, I'm comfortable in what I do, but I feel I'm not safe because in the hands of the police, the people who are supposed to protect me, I might also die in their hands. So we need also to look at that, because now the government is not only messing the economy, it is also messing when it comes to dealing with human beings and their rights. And that, I think, is also, instigating and also fueling up the kind of uprising that we are seeing. Yeah.
What is characterizing this uprising? Because I'm wondering if there is concert in terms of what everybody feels is the issue, and how it should actually then be addressed. It sounds that sometimes we try to call a thing a certain way and it's not exactly the issue. So coming back to you, Ouko, what do you think are the issues, the underlying ones? Or do you feel that we sometimes just joining the party because it sounds like the trendy thing to do at the moment?
Yes. Now, in characterizing this Gen Z movement and the people whom we see this on the streets, there are three kind of crowds you will normally see on the streets, okay? Now, the first kind of crowd are people whom we call hired crowds. Number two, we have people whom we call plastic crowds. Number three are the ones whom we call organic crowds. Hired crowds are these people whom obviously we know will be mobilized by the political class to join this movement. To
what gain? I want to hired crowds to just be in the street and then...
No. Of course, it's for narrative control that, a government it's losing to its end. So, of course, politicians, you don't expect the people who are in the opposition just to be sitting, resting. Of course, they mobilize young people to go. And I'm aware of the mobilization that goes around. Then they're plastic crowds.
No, hang on. To do what? Because if these are just hired crowds to be in the street to go along with the other to go along with the other protesters, then they're joining the protest.
To create narrative.
How?
When the huger the crowd, the huger the narrative.
Absolutely, okay? But it goes to enabling for the initial protest. Remember that the protest that we're talking about is a peaceful protest for a certain agenda. Now, if you're saying that the first character of a crowd that joins this protest is to make the crowd bigger, well, then that is going towards the initial agenda, which is to have a protest. So it's not counterintuitive. It's joining the protest.
Yes, it's joining the protest. I'm saying but that it works in the favor of, say, for example, the protests are against government and the people who hire these crowds are from the opposition. It's in the favor of the protest and in the favor of those who are anti-government. I think we are still just on the same. We are saying the same thing.
Is it wrong though?
So you have crowds for people who are pro-government and anti-government, but they're on the same agenda.
No. I think I'm saying the characteristics of the types of people we see on the streets. They can be either hired, they can either be plastic. Plastic are those people who are like, okay, Patrick was going to work, but I saw some crowd here. What are they protesting? Anti-Ruto? I joined the crowd. There are people who are like, it wasn't their purpose to join the protest, but they joined it as a result of seeing the protest.
Okay.
Then the third group is the organic crowd, people who are just generally angry. And I think they formed the hugest crowd, I think, generally for the people who are on the streets this other day. So it should be alarming for government. If you have a protest which has majorly hired crowds, you don't need to worry. But if the protest is formed by an organic crowd, you need to worry. Now, my challenge with the arrangement of how these Gen Z uprising...
Who needs to worry?
Government.
Okay. If you see a large organic
crowd, you need to worry.
What would be the element for worry?
The element for worry is that these people are not people who are persuaded or paid to come here, but it is something that it's affecting a number of people, and it's a genuine concern. It's not some political persuasion that's happening around here. Now, my challenge with this Gen Z uprising is that, one, it's really predictable. I normally tell people, you cannot fool government twice. You cannot use the same strategy that, you use Occupy Parliament, and the same strategy of mobilization, and think that it will work the same time. Government can be really funny. Even amongst those people who are protesting, government can send its own people there. Do you know the people who are protesting? Their government can mobilize for those, so that there are people. And the reason why I'm saying this is that it can use this as a purpose of confusion, both for those in the opposition and even amongst the Gen Z, so that a politician on the opposition will say, oh, so we have so many Gen Zs on our thing, not knowing that these are people who have been mobilized by government.
Another thing that is predictable is how police would handle these protests.
Yes.
Because every time when protests happen, there's a reason why every other protester comes out with water, with face masks, and at times even with helmets and toothpaste, because they know tear gas will be lobbed. And others recently, even in these demos, some were actually bidding goodbye to their people, simply because they were not sure that they would go back home. So when we talk about predictability, it is on both sides. But leave alone the predictability, leave alone the plastic crews or hired goons or whatever, whichever way you want to look at it. Let us look at the agenda that is being pushed. Are we sitting down to listen to the agenda that is being pushed? Sit down, reflect, and implement those issues, address them such that these protests stop being the order of the day, because we listen to our people, we listen to our Gen Zs, we are addressing their issues, and everyone is happy at the end of the day. Patrick,
I think we are not listening to what the young people are saying, and the best thing that will let you know that we are not listening, or the government is not listening. You just have to look at the address that the CS had after the demonstrations. The CS had a public address where he was just castigating everyone, including the judiciary, telling them, these people, we arrest them, the protesters, we bring them to court, but you give them favorable bail terms, and they are back on the streets. He was castigating everyone, castigating his fellow political leaders, castigating the protesters, all Kenyans in one address. But he was not talking about the issues that the Gen Zs have been raising. So I would have expected the CS to come out and say, yes, we know you are agitating for good governance. We know you are agitating for integrity and accountability. And these are the things that the government are willing to do. These are the things that we are putting in place. But we had him go to an extent where he actually threatened Kenyans, and he told the police, if you see someone near the police station, actually go ahead and shoot them. So the way the government is handling this whole thing, I think is the wrong way, because the moment you bring the perception like it's the government or it's the leaders against the masses, you definitely are not going to win. I heard the MP for Kikuyu the other day just thumping and saying that the finance bill that you were against last year, we were able to pass it and there's nothing you can do. So that in itself is bringing that perception that the government or the leaders in this country want the people to perceive that it's them as the leaders of the government against the masses. And I can tell them that this is a war that they cannot win. This is a war that they cannot win, because at the end of the day, it's the people who put them there, and they have a right to send them home backpacking. So what they should be doing at this moment is actually looking at the issues and stop politicizing it, because I had them trying now to shift the blame to other political leaders. You'll hear them say, oh, it is Rigathi Gachagua, oh, it is Kalonzo. They are trying now to push this whole issue to a corner of politics, which is easier for them to deal with. It's hard for them to deal with the real issues, but it's easier for them to play politics around the whole issue. So for me, if I look at it, they are not willing to listen. They are not willing to listen. That's why their reaction is always political, and trying to blame their political opponents, instead of owning up as the people who are in government, owning up as the people who are sitting in those seats and saying, yes, we are ready to work. Can we sit down and talk about these issues and actually show some goodwill? Don't come and play some PR. Tell us that we've heard that you're not comfortable with us dishing out cash wherever we go. We are not going to do that. But after 2-3 weeks, we see the president doing the same thing that he said that he's going to stop. So the issue also of being sincere, because at the end of the day, we are people. At the end of the day, the president, the cabinet the cabinet secretaries, they are people also. There's a certain way also you can communicate to those people, and they'll feel that you are genuine, right? But the whole issue of bravado, chest thumping, I think that goes into infuriating the masses more, and that in itself is not bringing solutions.
Patrick Hungo is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, and Mark Ouko, Youth Coordinator, National Students' Council of Kenya. We're having a conversation around this perspective today and bringing in and saying, okay, well, this is discourse, this is where we are. Let us keep an eye on this. It goes to the point now where we're saying that, steps, does there need to be a coming together of ideas? The conversation over the last couple of days is that there needs to be representatives that sit in the room. Does that need to happen, Mark?
Yeah, I think that needs to happen. But one of also the challenges that we need to ask ourselves is that why is there so much reluctancy amongst the young people towards having a conversation with with the political class, or in this case government, because they're the one who are mandated to implement a number of these things that the young people are asking. Because one of the things that we're also seeing, and I'd say this, that there comes to a place where there needs to be an end with decentralized structures. If you are to have a meaningful discussion, or to discuss some of these things that are affecting young people, the young people must give a few, or not all of them can say if the venue of discussing will be at State House, not all these young people can go to State House. If they can have a few of their representatives go there. But also what we are seeing is that a number of these young people do not want a number of these representatives, whether it's the student leaders, the youth leaders, do not want to go to have a discussion with government, because they feel like at that point they will start losing their credibility. Because what you're saying is that a number of times the youth representatives who go to State House or go to a meetup with government officials around this, then they start being castigated on these social platforms. That's why I think most young people who are leading them, saving its youth leaders, student leaders, are afraid of going to represent them because of that castigation itself.
Here we are talking about why the young people don't want to meet with the leadership there is. And we don't need to go far. One would say during the campaign period is where it all started. You look at the chanting that put this government into place in serikali ya mahasla mavijana. We even had songs, sisi atupangwingwi. You know what I mean? All that was geared towards bringing in the young people and getting that vote, right? Now, there are even charters that were signed with young people. Then you get to government, and the young person is nowhere to be seen. When it comes to the taxes that are there, it is hurting the young person. Talk about how the economy is, unemployment and whatnot. All these are there. And when there are conversations on we will not meet you, they are meeting that was ahead on X Spaces with the president. One of the demands is fire them all, bring in people who will implement the issues. Who did we see come back on the table? The very same people who were fired. And the young people are asking, why should we then have this discussion with you if you've done the very same thing that we told you not to do? But then again, how do we move forward?
Well, I think the problem that we have in this country, Dennis, the issues that the Gen Zs are agitating for, these are actually common sense issues. I don't think we need to have a big baraza for us to sit down and tell the government that we need the government to respect the rule of law. right? We don't need a big baraza for us to tell the government that we need integrity and accountability. These are things that they had already promised us as they were campaigning. So we expected them to implement whatever they were telling us at that time. Why do they want us now to sit down with them and repeat the same thing, the same discussion that we had back then? So in short, what we are saying is that we've just realized that these people, they just want to take us through circles, round and round. Come, we sit, then we are done, they go back to default settings. As I said earlier, the president in 2024, when he was pushed to the corner, he went to X Spaces and he said, okay, my people, I've heard you. These are the measures that I'm going to put in place. This is what we are going to do. And after that, he fired the cabinet. Some of the people that fell off were taken as advisors, earning a salary equivalent to that of a cabinet secretary from our taxes. He made a lot of promises, and one promise that always lingers in my mind is when he said that this whole issue of display of opulence and dishing out cash, we are not going to do it anymore. No one is going to do it. But later he came back and said, I'm going to give this church 20 million and I'm going to go ahead and dish out cash, and there's nothing you people are going to do about it. Now, tell me, as a reasonable person, because I believe the youth of this country are reasonable people, are you going to sit down with the same person doing the same thing that he promised not to do? Are you going to sit down with that kind of person? What kind of results do you think we are going to get out of that discussion, honestly?
Ouko, I'd want to ask the question, does the government want to have conversations with Kenyans, and is there any evidence of that?
Yeah, in terms of asking that, before answering that, answer that question. Now, whenever a government is caught up in a form of crisis, I wouldn't necessarily want to quote it in a crisis, but in a serious situation, there are two things that government normally checks in, whether it is in control of. Now, one, you check, are you still in control of power? And two, are you still in control of the narrative? Control of power in the sense that you have not been overthrown, because in such a crisis where people are protesting, etc., and what we saw even last year, the parliament being banned, they're almost losing control of, legitimacy as the legislative house. Now, the second part is that once, you are still in control of power. The second bit is that, are you still in control of the narrative? And I was sharing with somebody status, I do not want to mention his name, but a very close ally of the president. I told him, if you do not have control of the narrative, all these things that you're doing won't make sense. Because you see, if the president has already been painted as a murderer, that is the first thing that comes to the mind of the average Kenyan. Whether you tell them about SHA, whether you tell them about the housing, whatever, you tell them about new funding model, all these things are diluted, and it's very dangerous. And I was telling them, if the young people are able to do this year, they do it on June 25th on 2026, and they do it on June 25th on 2027, 2 months to an election, it will be very, very dangerous for you. Now, in terms of your question is in terms of whether they really want to listen. The more things change, the more they still remain the question. They still remain the same. The fundamental thing is that, are they politically persuaded to sit with you? That's the first thing they normally ask themselves. Because if you see the things that the protests in 2025, in 2024, in 2023, even the one that was led by Raila, the Sufuria protest, they are the underlying same issues, youth unemployment, inclusivity, etc. Now, for them to bring you to sit with you on the table, they need to ask themselves, are they politically persuaded? The reason as to why they normally bring somebody like Raila on board is because they feel they are politically persuaded that the moment you bring Raila Amolo Odinga on board, there will be stability. The challenge with the young people is that working with the decentralized structures is really hard, because one, you don't know whom to speak with. If you speak with Kungu today, he will be bashed on social media that he is betraying the movement. So these people are not centralized, and they have not been centralized in a way that it's easy to even see whom to discuss with.
Isn't implementation of the agenda and the issues raised by the young people then a point of conversation that does not need people to sit on the table?
You really don't have to sit down, honestly. Let us be honest when we are talking about these issues. We've had a lot of, even our politicians, they go to a lot of retreats. They go to sit down and to come up with reports that do not really help us. So talking really won't help us. What we want the government to do, we want it to implement its manifesto. We want it to respect the constitution and govern within the law. That is what we want. Now, a simple thing like the case of Albert Ojwang, a simple thing like having the DIG held to account, that would really speak volumes, right? Now, the reason why 25th was as hot as it was because the youth had just witnessed, or seen the murder of Albert Ojwang. And from where we sit, we can see that the people who sit in the high places are kind of being protected, and the small fish is being left to hang. Now, you tell a youth who's sitting at home is looking at that whole situation, and you're telling that youth, come, we talk. First of all, can you implement the law fairly? Let it apply to the big fishes and to the small fishes. We don't want it to seem like the moment you have a senior position in government, you are untouchable. But the rest of us who are down kidogo, we can be left to fry. So there are simple things that the government can do. And as I said when we started, these issues are issues of common sense, right? From where I sit, I don't think this whole thing of saying that we need to sit down and talk will be wasting our time. The government knows what it is supposed to do, and it is deliberately failing to do so for their own reasons, right? We've seen the Auditor General, the Controller of Budget come out, tell us that there are trillions of shillings that are being withdrawn irregularly. Now, things like that of lacking accountability and integrity, right? Do we need really to sit down with you and tell you that your government needs to be accountable? Do we really need to do that?
So a conversation doesn't need to happen. Is that what you're saying?
We've already had this conversation. That is what I'm saying. We've already had these conversations before. It's just that the government is not willing to implement whatever we discuss. They know what is ailing this country. They do. They know what is ailing these young people. They do. They are just not willing to work towards finding solutions for that. They just want to play politics with this thing. And I'm actually very disappointed that our parliament will trivialize what happened on 25th and play politics with it. Yeah? Trying to target their political nemesis. And trying to bring this whole issue to a corner of politics only. That is wrong. And that's why I'm saying sitting and discussing with people who have that kind of mentality, for me, I don't think it's going to work. They already know what is required of them. They're just not willing to find the solutions.
So one side is not willing and that has been clear across board. I mean, and in terms of us getting to the point whereby you need to think about what the possible solutions would then be. And if it has been constantly that one side knows what to do and has not made the steps towards making the right decision, how then do we deal with this situation? Obviously, going back to the streets repetitively, for a lot of people is the answer. For some people it's not. But how do we then make the next steps towards saying we must find a solution?
Yeah, first of all, I need to say that I do disagree with the point that we need to discard the option, first of all, of dialogue or sitting down. I think there are two purposes that a dialogue or that sitting down does. One, of course, to buy time, because all these things cannot just be if it's around solving youth unemployment, it cannot be just solved at once at a go. Some of these things you need to there needs to be some time to put some of these measures, etc. But two, also just to create that atmosphere to do that, because if you see at one of the best case studies, if you see even as to how President Ruto managed the opposition or was able to bring an inclusive government around with the broad-based framework, it doesn't start by just appointing Mbadi to this position, etc., etc. No, it starts from him first of all being perceived to have a conversation with Raila Amolo Odinga to create that atmosphere even amongst his political constituents that this will be the direction. So the purpose of that conversation is to create, because you can't talk or work with people who are angry. You need to create first of all that atmosphere. In terms of willingness, as I told you, it all goes to, are they politically persuaded to actually work with you? Because if you run around as disorganized, somebody will just go to a minority group that is much organized and work with them as such as the Raila side. And something just now, by the way, and I've heard him speak about around the Lagat issue so much. Many people have really asked me whether the president will really take out a DIG Lagat. And in my thoughts, one, morally, he would have had to. But I think politically, I don't foresee him removing DIG Lagat for three reasons. One, the moment he removes DIG Lagat, everyone who is loyal to the president, Akina Sudi, Raymond, Murkomen, would get to their mind that they are dispensable. That no matter how loyal you are to me, you are dispensable. That's the first message that you'll be sending to all other people that are loyal to me.
Is the DIG loyal to the president, or is he there to serve the country and equally ensure that the police service is independent and operates within the law?
This is a thing. Of course, we know how things operate in this country. There is the technocratic way in which we expect people to operate in this country. But of course, this is a country that operates within some political arithmetics. The second reason as to why the president will not remove DIG Lagat in my view is that when somebody wants to come and steal from you, they don't directly come to fight you. So they start with the soldier, the person at your gate. But the most important reason is that anyone who is loyal to the president will feel they're dispensable. And
they should be.
Why then have a president who cannot guarantee that there is rule of law and constitutionalism? Why have him in place?
Yeah. That is the big question. That is a big question, because if he's there just to play political games, then we don't need him there. If he's there to just serve his political friends, then he has no business to be sitting in that seat. And I think that's the biggest problem that we are having with this government. They are failing to look at the real issues, and that is the thing that is making Kenyans angry. We need to see this government tackling the real issues. And as I said earlier, I was really disappointed by what CS Murkomen came out to say, because I really expected him to at least assure Kenyans, assure the Gen Zs that we've heard you. I expected that sort of message. We've heard you, and this is what we are willing to do. But he did the extreme opposite of that. He went ahead to even threaten these people, telling the police, if these people come to the police station, shoot them. Now, you are dealing with a generation that is not even afraid to die. You're dealing with a generation that is even writing obituaries days before going for maandamanos. Now, do you think now threatening them with guns and bullets is going to do anything? It's going to infuriate them. Now, the crowds that we saw on 25th were actually bigger than the crowds that we saw last year in June. Now, instead of trying to find a way to try and make sure that these people, the anger have subsided, they are threatening these people and thinking that will work. The way I look at it, and I think the president and his government needs to be a little bit serious about this whole issue. If you are put in power and you are there to serve the public, and the way you are serving them, the public is telling you, we are not okay with the way you are doing your things. We need you to do things differently. And the issues that they are telling you are not strange issues. They are issues that you actually know, and they are issues that are implementable. then you choose not to hear what they are saying, you choose to threaten them. I think by going down that road, Dennis, we are going to find ourselves in a situation that will be very, very difficult to control. And to some extent, I think sometimes I look at it and I think maybe that's what they want us to do, so that we don't have elections in 2027, as Moses Kure has been saying, if you think about it. Because if you are telling you that really we are not okay with the way the situation is, and you still insist, you're still insisting on doing things the way you are doing them, then sometimes we get to a situation where we have to infer, what do you really want?
And I think to sum it all up, it's just the idea that the presidency, the leadership is there to serve the people, not the people to serve them. I think that's where I'll just end it into.
Yeah. I mean, they're still questions up in the air. There's still conversations to be had, and here we are, and it's necessary that we keep engaging. Absolutely. I want to thank you both for being here this morning. Marco Ouko and Patrick Kungu, thank you for joining and closing out this week's conversation of the Situation Room. Sante sana.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.